Hello, everyone. My name is Chisom, and I'm here to talk about my experience working and living in both America and Ireland and comparing that experience for people who are making the move to either one of those countries. To give some background information, I lived in America from 2013 to 2020. I was an international student, and during that time, I lived in the Midwest, the East Coast, and the West Coast. And then I lived in Ireland from 2020 to 2022. I'm going to compare my experience living in Dublin to my experience living in different parts of America. While I was in America, as I said earlier, I lived in the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Midwest. In the Midwest specifically, I lived in South Bend, Indiana. I attended St. Mary's College in Indiana and the University of Notre Dame. For the East Coast, I lived in DC. I spent 2 summers living in DC. And for the West Coast, post-graduation, I lived in San Francisco and just generally in the Bay Area as a whole. First of all, let's compare city life. I would compare Dublin to a mid-sized city in the Midwest. So Dublin, compared to other cities in the US like New York and San Francisco, is very small. But it kind of resembles a Columbus, Ohio. But people are much nicer and the city is far more walkable. Actually, one of the ways in which American cities are very different from European cities is that a lot of European cities are very old and they're kind of made for people to walk around them compared to American cities or newer American cities that are far more car dependent. And so something I noticed while living in Dublin was that Dublin was one of the cities where you could walk anywhere and you didn't need a car to actually live a very good life in Dublin. With regards to city life, Dublin has a thriving pub culture, as you would imagine. So it's not unheard of for people to just go to the pubs. For a fun night out with your friends, it's expected that you would end up going to the pub. And there are lots of pubs all over the city that offer lots of different things. Compared to my time in San Francisco, where it's more of a meetup culture, or if you wanted to go out, you'd go to a club or you would go to a bar. And for my time in DC, I didn't go anywhere, so I have nothing to compare with that time. With regards to work, Dublin work culture is completely different. I remember when I was in New York for a weekend and everybody was like, tourists, get out of our way, like we're on our grind. New York people are working themselves to the bone. They do not have time for anyone else. Dublin culture is far more chill. Ireland as a whole has a greater emphasis on work-life balance compared to, I think, any city in the US. I think this is what happens when people have like socialized healthcare. They just become nicer and they just generally will not work as hard. So if you're moving to Ireland, your pace of life will be slower compared to if you're living in any other city in the US, which is expected. With regards to diversity, so this was something I was concerned about because prior to moving in Dublin, I lived in Oakland, and Oakland is a very diverse city. Like we have people from everywhere in Oakland, and I was very worried about moving to a place where I worried I would not find nearly as many people from lots of different backgrounds. But Dublin as a whole is very diverse. Like Dublin is weirdly diverse. Not weird in a bad way, but Dublin has a lot of people from every different part of Europe and all over the world actually living in there. While in Dublin, I worked at a farmer's market, the farmer's market that is in Temple Bar. I worked there for a couple of weekends. And you see people from every different part of Europe in Dublin. So you see Italians, you see Germans, you see French people, you'd see British people, everybody was there. But you also see lots of people from lots of different races. So if you are afraid of how diverse Dublin will be, Dublin is going to be very diverse. You would see everyone there. And as a whole, you know the stereotype that Irish people are nicer? Yes, they are nicer. I think there is just something about the culture. There are lots of different times where I would be walking around the street at night and there would be someone passed out on the street and somebody would freely walk up to them and help them and ask them if there's anything wrong. If that ever happened in Oakland or in San Francisco, you're on the street, nobody's going to help you. And I remember my horrible experience moving to Dublin, which I'll make a story time about. During that time, the bus driver who literally picked me up from the airport gave me my first Irish breakfast because he knew how horrible it was moving to Dublin. Irish people generally are nicer. I think like when God was making Irish people, he poured in extra kindness because they come out better than the rest of us. Dating in Dublin, dating is bad everywhere. There's no place. I always hear a lot of American women, because I know a lot of American women because I spend so much time there, talking about how they need to go get a foreign man, a European man. It's hard everywhere, okay? And the reason why it's hard is because the numbers just never add up anywhere. So if you're a woman in like DC or New York, the numbers are not in your favor because there are more women in those places than there are men. And if you're a woman in the Bay Area, yes, there are more men than there are women, but my experience dating in the Bay has not been great anyway. And I don't think men in the Bay have enjoyed their dating experiences either. And if you're somebody living in Dublin, the problem is Dublin is very small. So your dating pool is generally small. So if you're hoping that you're going to come to Dublin and you're going to find your own corner and this is going to be your own normal people, you'll be very disappointed. It's not like that. With regards to food, I lived in the Bay, so I was spoiled with the best type of food from all over the world. Like in California as a whole and just the Bay Area, you can be as specific and as niche as you want with your food. You can find the weirdest kinds of fusions as you want with your food. But obviously, because Dublin is smaller, you don't expect to find nearly as many different types of food, but Dublin has enough. Like if you want Thai food, you find multiple Thai restaurants. If you want Mexican food, you find multiple Mexican restaurants. Like Dublin even has its own form of Chipotle called Boojum, and I spent an inordinate amount of money in Boojum. I spent way too much money in Boojum. So if you're living in Dublin, you will find the food variety, maybe not nearly as good, but you'll find enough variety in Dublin. And lastly, with regards to education, this was something I learned over time. When I went to college in the Midwest. And generally as a whole, when America sells you the college experience, it's not just about getting an education. It's also about living on campus, making some of your best friends, going to college football games, having niche college experiences. Dublin, and I think this is a European thing, but specifically in Dublin, there isn't that much of a college experience. It's more like you go get an education and you make your friend group, yes, within college, but there's no emphasis on a college culture. It's more, this is a place to get your education, and that's about it. So if you've enjoyed this video of me talking about my experience living in both countries, I have another video where I talk about my horrible experience moving to Dublin, where I got scammed by this horrible rental agency that shall not be named unless I feel like taking a risk, and then I shall name their asses because they cannot find me in Nigeria, and if they try to sue me, they will just waste their money doing so. But till then, I'll see you next time.